This is WPSL Port St. Lucie, the talk of the Treasure Coast.
.06 at WPSL 1590, the talk of the Treasure Coast. You are on Ask a Rabbi here on WPSL. Good morning.
Good morning and welcome to Ask a Rabbi. Please do give me a call with any question you might have at 772-340-1590, 1590. Be glad to answer any questions. And just a shout out real quick to my friends out in Tucson. Plan to be out there the end of July, so maybe do a
can you
swing
put me
down.
in your suitcase?
I hear you, especially when it's 197% humidity out there. Yeah. Now, as my boss at Goodyear used to say, I never in my life exaggerate.
They had a thing on Facebook today on Tucson. They have this big food festival out there.
Yes,
I guess.
Tucson, meet yourself.
Yeah. And that the tradition goes all the way back to the Indians and stuff. And I'm thinking, oh wow, that's what I miss. Yeah,
I do remember that festival. There's a lot of really great festivals. We need to get some of those festivals going here on the Treasure Coast. There's the 4th Avenue Festival. We need some of those kinds of things here in the Treasure Coast because we've got certainly enough talent and we've got enough folks and that's as good a segue as any to say keep an eye on our website because we've got the Treasure Coast Expo coming up and then we've got the Treasure Coast Art Festival and those are both at the community center. So do keep in touch for those and if you want to be a vendor, you want to have a booth, please give us a call. And if you want to come, please do. Admission is free for everyone who wants to come and be a part of it.
My former intern in San Diego is the chairman of the University of Arizona Foundation.
Ah.
Yeah, and he's done very well for himself at the U of A.
Yeah.
So I miss Tucson so much.
There are some things that Tucson certainly can serve as role models for the rest of us. And some of that's the kind of social things that go on. Definitely some good things. And hopefully we'll learn to bring some of those and get them happening. It's just getting enough people excited about certain ideas. And I know that there's enough artists in the area because just by demographics there has to be. And so we need to get some of those folks together for some of the things.
We were moving some stuff around this weekend and all the DeGrazia stuff, was there, and we're thinking Ted DeGrazia. I mean, I used to love going to his studio and vintage Tucson.
Philibom and lots of things.
Oh yeah.
And Low. There's lots of artists that are just great in the Tucson area.
Sure.
So I may get a chance to see some of those folks, and then we're probably going to take a swing and actually do the Grand Canyon. When I lived there, I actually never did the Grand Canyon other than driving over, through, and around it.
You've got to.
Yeah.
It's
one of those things that, you just... this time I actually put it on the schedule and said, we're going to do that. So,
Have you ever been up to Navajo? Navajo Reservation.
Yes.
Yeah, that's.
Yeah, there's.
Oh, it's gorgeous.
We used to go to a conference in Salt Lake, and we would just book it north through Arizona.
Sure. Yeah.
And gorgeous, incredible Zion Park and all of that area, just beautiful. There's no question that the scenery is amazing. God's paintbrush.
Yes. Oh yeah. No doubt.
So you look at that. So for all my folks, my friend, because I've got some of my friends already saying hi through Facebook from the Tucson area. You guys are up early to do this, and I appreciate that. And
8 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, I appreciate all the folks who listen in, and I appreciate any phone calls that anyone has at 772-340-1590. We talked last week a little bit about transgender and gender issues and things like that, and it's kind of interesting, right? People want to say, they want to read into scriptures and say that there's a built-in bias there. And I'm going to go on record and say it's not so much a reading out of text as it is reading into it. It's wanting to see what you're looking for. And Scriptures does that. It's something called cherry picking. And a lot of people do it. They will look through a long passage or whatever in Scriptures, and then they'll pull a little line that, if you use a half a sentence, it says what they want it to say. And that's not fair. It's just not fair. It's not fair to Scriptures. It's not fair to the faith traditions. And it's not fair to the people you're going to be beating over the head with it. So, because, like one of my favorite lines out of Scriptures is, they shall beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. But if you read through the text, there's another prophet who says just the opposite. Right, they shall take their pruning hooks and beat them into spears, and their plowshares and beat them into swords. And Ecclesiastes kind of says it in a lot of ways. It says there's a time for war and a time for peace, a time for building up and a time for tearing down.
You should write music.
Oh, gee, yeah. Turn.
Yes.
I that music.
No, you weren't even born then.
But you hear it, you hear it all over.
I know.
For a long time, I think for 30 years, turn lived, and you still hear it. We had a bar mitzvah celebration just, feels like, a month ago because it's been a crazy time, but it was 2 weeks ago now. And, they were playing Electric Slide and all these classics that, and you sort of go, is that still being played? And, and people still dance to it.
Oh, sure.
And so, these are classics now.
Yeah.
And I love when people, try to tell you that this is another one of my little pet peeves, right? So a melody that you do for liturgy, right? People will say to you, oh, that's always been the melody. No, that's the way it was when you were a kid. That's not always. That's just, a few decades. There's a lot of our liturgy that's, less than 200 years old. There was a lot of Jewish opera in Europe. And very often those melodies work their way back into the liturgy because people knew them, people liked them. They liked the melodies. And there's a couple of beer drinking songs that are in some prayers, right?
Oh, come on.
No, I'm serious. There's one that's very popular for Saturday morning. It's a German drinking song. But if you think about it, so we're going to go before TV. Okay, I realize that's sometimes a little hard. But we go back to, say, the founding of America, the 1700s. And they didn't have TV. They didn't have radio. They certainly didn't have records. They didn't have CDs. They didn't have cassettes. They didn't have any of that technology. But they still advertised.
What about my cell phone? Oh.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of funny. I show a clip in some of my classes. I show a couple of Star Trek clips here and there, and of course they've all got PDAs of some sort. And I always have to remind the students those things didn't exist. They hadn't been invented yet. This was really a radical concept, the idea that you'd have something about the size of my cell phone that had all kinds of digital information on it that you could have somebody else read or look at. And I was thinking about that last night. I was at a meeting where people were showing pictures and showing text and things. But going back to before all that technology and before TV and radio, certainly before radio, that's where the jingles were really, really big. If you wanted to sell something, like one of my favorites is a melody for Nottingham Ale. And it's kind of a funny song. And you can learn it in Williamsburg, in Colonial Williamsburg.
Okay, yeah.
If you go to the pubs there, they sing the jingles that were popular in the 1770s.
Wow.
And Nottingham Ale is one of them, and that one's one of my favorites. And because what they would do is they would teach lyrics that would promote some brand, and people would take it up if it was a catchy tune. They'd actually they'd pay bards, right, musicians, to go around and sing these, go through the different bars in the area and teach the clientele the music.
Subliminal advertising.
Subliminal advertising. It's not new. They may not have understood the psychology, but they knew that it worked.
So when are you talking century-wise of when a lot of this music started in Europe?
For a lot of Jewish melodies come out of the 17 and 1800s and early 1900s. And, nothing wrong with that.
Mm-hmm.
There are older melodies, not too many. Torah chanting is older, although there's a variety of different melodies. Right? So there's Yemenite melodies, there's European melodies, there's, depending on where you are in the world. Yemenite Torah melodies, because there's different Jews, right? Most American Jews are Ashkenaz, which is European Jews. There's a chunk of American Jewry that's Sephardi. Those are Spanish Jews, originally Spanish Jews.
Okay.
And when Spain kicked out the Jews and the Muslims in 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue, and Jews and Muslims were kicked out as Ferdinand and Isabella re-Christianized Spain. It was a very big, it's a predecessor before the Inquisition. The Inquisition's going to take over very shortly thereafter. But in that wave, those folks went down toward Morocco and out toward Turkey and populated a big chunk around the Mediterranean. So you've got a lot of Sephardi Jews. And then also a group of them went to outposts of Portugal and Spain. So a lot of them were in the merchant marine, for lack of a better word. Right, they were traders and things like that. And so there's pockets of Sephardi Jews all over the world. And then there's Mizrahi, which are Eastern Jews. So Jews can be categorized by many different ways, just as Catholics and Protestants can be characterized by different things. So there's a whole lot of different ethnicities within Judaism.
So when you say chased out, were they persecuted?
Yes.
Were they?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. In fact, I was just helping some people with some certification of lineage, because Spain is now opening their doors and saying, if you come from one of these families that had been established in Spain and got kicked out, then we're going to welcome you back for citizenship. It's like, the reverse of DACA. We won't go there. But excuse me. So, so Spain is going out of their way to extend citizenship to the descendants of those Jews.
Wow.
Yeah, which is really pretty cool. And
but is there some record of these families?
Well, sometimes you have records, because Jews keep a lot of paper records, and so you can tell who married who and who is the child of who.
Okay.
And so it's easier to establish it. And there are some really good lineages out there, and then there's some cobbled up ones that people have kind of built to say what they want to say. But there are established, researched ones that have been maintained through the generations.
That's a huge story, though.
It is huge, and there's a lot of people doing it, and the window is about to close, actually, because it closes at the end of this year. They're not gonna, it was the window, and if you qualified, you could get your paperwork in gear and submit it through the program that they have set up for it.
What has been the response to that?
There's been a lot of people who've done it.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah. And like I said, I've participated in some of the certification of lineage for people. So it's a big deal.
So are there reparations, or is it just?
It's more just.
I shouldn't say just citizenship.
Yeah, well,
that's a big deal too.
It's citizenship, and if you're in Europe, it's medical treatment, because Spain has socialized medicine. Right, we're one of the few countries that doesn't have socialized medicine for its population. So,
but we all know how good our medical care is.
Right.
Moving along.
Yes. Well, okay, so to be fair, there are side effects, if you will, to any system, unintended consequences. Right? I teach English to Chinese students, and I listen to them complain, if you will, about their school system. You know, they have paid education all the way through college if you pass the exams. That's the negative side to socialized education, which is, you know, here in America, if you can find a college or a university to go to, no matter what your grades are. You can find a way of getting into some program, right? Because there's enough open enrollment schools, and you know, then you can get your grades up and get to where you really want to go if your grades aren't perfect, but you're going to incur a lot of debt along the way, and either that or have very rich sponsors or parents. Same difference, right? But in China, the education is paid for by the state, but they don't have unlimited seats, right? So only a certain percentage of the students are going to get in.
So you're probably still talking about the upper 10% or 20%.
Yeah. You really, some of it's academic capability, but yeah, the wealthy have a way of making sure those things happen, no matter where they are. And you know, or again, the choice could be to go out of the country and get an education elsewhere, which is what some of them do if they don't make the cut.
UCLA.
Yeah.
Actually, USC used to joke about that you know, the A stood for Asians. Yeah.
Well, and you know, and people will. And I was talking to to a very delightful young lady. She's just starting high school, and she tested like number 49 in her district out of all the students. So you ready for this? They're only taking like 60 students out of her district.
Whoa.
Yeah, so she's really doing quite well. And she did mostly in science. And but before you take the test, you have to choose what tier high school you want to go to, whether it's tier 1, tier 2, or tier 3. And she picked tier 2 because she didn't think she'd score high enough on the exams to get into one. It turns out she did, but she can't change it now.
Wow.
Yeah, so there's some rigidity when it's paid for that we might not recognize. You know, these unintended consequences kind of situation. And, you know, it's the old story. It's never pure white. It's never pure black. It's never pure bright. It's never pure dark. It's never pure hot. Never pure cold, because we really can't achieve absolute zero. Right. So we just... And the world really is a mix. It's various shades and various degrees. And
when you're talking about this testing, is it similar to what our kids had to go through here in Florida, or
it's something similar? It's a state mandated test, and they test in Chinese, not surprisingly. They test in English. They test in science. They test in math. They test in music and in art.
Wow.
And PE.
And PE. Wow. Yeah, well.
Right.
Yeah, I've been around Chinese athletes. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Because they really want the rounded person. And so, you know, can you get in if you excel in, you know, some of these areas? Yes. You can't be lousy in all of them. And you can't just excel in one and probably cut it. You need to be in a couple of things. And that's one of the reasons why they spend a lot of time and energy very early in a child's education to give them a lot of benefit and a lot of variety. What they don't give them is a lot of initiative. But that's a whole other issue. They give them a lot of discipline and a lot of incentive to study and do well. They do an average of 1 to 2 hours of homework after they come home from school every day.
Now, how many days a week do they go to school?
Most of them, from what I'm gathering, it's 5. A couple of places it's 6.
Okay, so it would be the same as
yeah. It's pretty much mostly a Monday to Friday.
I think Japan is 6.
Yeah, and some parts of China are 6 as well. I think if it's 6, then it's usually a shorter day. You know, so
like a half day. Yeah.
Well, not a half, but 3/4. It works out the same, and. So, yeah, now, most of the students that I deal with, and I deal with students all over China. So I've got from north of Shanghai, north of Beijing, rather, and to south all the way to Sanya, which is the very southern part south of Hong Kong. And
Now, have you been there?
I've been to Hong Kong. I've been to Hong Kong and the area around Hong Kong, which at the time was called Kowloon. I don't know if it's still,
Sure.
Shenzhen is in that area, and there's a lot of buildup. I probably wouldn't recognize half of what's there now. So, yeah, it's an interesting place. Yeah, we were there one winter. We were coming back from a trip, and stopped and said, it'd be kind of fun to spend some time in Hong Kong. So we did.
That'd be interesting to meet face to face with some of the kids that you've been dealing with.
Oh yeah. Well, some of them say, hey, the next time I come to Florida, I'll look you up, and they might. So far they haven't. I've been doing this for 3 years now, so they might sometime, and it would be fun. It would be fun. There's some really great kids. Teaching them for 3 years, I've gotten to know some of the kids pretty well. And I look at this interaction not only in terms of obviously there's a financial piece for me in doing it, but there's also a kind of a bridging, if you will. They now know Americans, right? Whether it's me or other American teachers, because this company has thousands of American teachers that work with the kids, and and we know Chinese. And this is not at some high government level. This is on a person-to-person level. And I really do believe that that's where the future is going to be made. And so I really like the idea of a generation of Chinese kids growing up knowing Americans one-on-one and being able to interact with us. And I will tell you, they take their English very, very seriously. I've got a couple of little chatterboxes in class that can chatter as well as any 5, 6, 7-year-old here can chatter in English, and just, long stream of consciousness. And then I've got others who struggle. And there's this wide variety.
So what's the youngest youngster that you deal with?
I have dealt with 3-year-olds.
Oh, my God.
Yeah,
Really?
3-year-olds. And the 3-year-olds that I've dealt with have a decent amount of spoken English already. Now, I'm going to guess that they come from families where people speak some English. Now, it's what's always fun is the parents frequently are sitting just off camera. They don't right. You don't see them when you're talking to the kid. The kid fills up the screen, but you can every once in a while hear the parent. And so I'm working with the kid and I correct the kid, and then I hear the parent correcting with a different pronunciation and I'm like, excuse me, I'm the teacher.
Do you ever meet the parents?
Sometimes they'll come on screen.
Okay.
And sometimes they'll say hi, and sometimes I'll even say to the kids, are your parents handy? Because I want to tell the parents, the kid needs to do this project, because last time when we had an assessment, they didn't do their project and they lost 4 points. Which is a big chunk when your assessment has 36 points.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to be throwing 4 out the door because Johnny forgot to do his project. So, depends on the age of the kid. If it's a teenager, then that's their problem. And I teach all the way up into the high school ranges. So I've got this wide variety. And at every level, I've got kids that are struggling and kids that are doing really well.
So are their teens any different than our teens?
Yes and no.
Okay.
Some of the same. It's there's a picture at the last screen before we're done with the class, before the goodbye slide, is please remember to finish your homework or something along those lines, or don't forget to do your homework, or I forget if it's positive or negative. And then it's a picture of one of the characters. There's Meg and Mike are two characters in the curriculum, and there's a picture of one of them on the computer working at this where it says do your homework, and a couple of the kids will say, they're not doing their homework, they're playing a computer game. And so one of the kids, I asked them, well, how, what makes you say that, figuring they're projecting, right? They said, well, look at her hand, it's on the arrow keys. You want to talk about noticing something? I'm like, really? And I looked at it in the picture. her right hand is down in the lower right hand of the keyboard.
Wow.
Now, I don't think anybody planned it that way. The artist just probably put the hands wherever it was comfortable, or they were looking at a picture of a kid playing a video game. But these kids have picked up on that. And
wow.
Yeah. So and it starts out really very simple with the 3-year-olds. We're doing very basic things. We're, as much as anything else, getting their ears accustomed to hearing English, because there's a lot of sounds that we have that Chinese doesn't have. They have a lot of sounds we don't have. And until your ear can pick these up, it's always fun, when a Chinese will say something to you and you repeat it back to them and it's Chinese and they giggle. You know that you've butchered because the sounds. And, it's the same thing as R's and L's for Asians. Very, very difficult. And you'll get either a W for an R, like weirdly, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or you get reary,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because of the R and L.
Yeah.
Because those sounds are not distinct in their language. And we actually physically stop registering the sounds we're not used to hearing. And it's one of the reasons why I push this really hard with my development kids at IRSC. And now I'm going to flip to another teaching environment. At IRSC, I stress to the kids, when you have kids, make them bi or trilingual. Consciously make sure they get another language and not just memorizing a couple of words of dialogue and being able to spout out 50 vocabulary words, but really get them bilingual, because it changes the way our brains form. And can you still learn it later? Yes, you can. You absolutely can. It just will take you a lot longer. It's harder. We used to think that the brain was formed and, history was destiny and you can't change anything, and that's not true. We're learning that the brain is amazingly modifiable and it's amazingly plastic. It wants to do what you want and need it to do. And so you can do these things later, they're just harder. Kids in between up to the age of about 10 or 12 are really in the language learning mode. 9 and younger, even more so. The younger you are, the more they learn it.
Well, I know Carol, when she was at the Indiana University Lab School by, 4th grade, I think they were speaking 3 languages.
Yeah. And kids can do it. Kids can handle it. Well, I grew up that way. I spoke German with my mother, Hebrew with my father, and English. And, we were at a restaurant just last week, and there was an Israeli, an expat Israeli, who lives in Tampa, who was visiting his family here in Port St. Lucie. And for what it had to do with the way the conversation was going, but they asked me a question in Hebrew, and I just immediately came back and responded in Hebrew, and everybody's like, how can you switch that fast? Because the languages are there. They're ready.
I was going to ask you, do you ever slip into...
Once in a blue moon, usually I can catch it if I don't want it to happen. But very often I will hear multiple languages at the same time. That's it, and it's hard to describe that. I do something that's kind of weird, which is I like puns, and I do a lot of that kind of. You've heard some of them.
Oh, sure, yeah.
And some of them I do that are Hebrew English puns. Like there's a phrase "ledaber mirma," to speak in. We would call it dissembling, right? And to speak in ways that project a different image than what you want. And the Hebrew word is mirmar, and I say to speak in mirrors, right?
Okay.
That's a pun slipping languages. So I'll do that, and those only work when I'm talking to people who speak the same 2 languages. So, yeah. And one of the folks on Facebook is saying to me that happens in Spanish and English in like Tucson. Yeah, that's why they call it Spanglish.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Right. Because
sure.
And in fact, the languages blend. There's another video that I use in my world religion class that's set in India, and it's India's Got Talent. It's a clip of a group, and the judges are talking, and they start out talking in Hindi, but there's enough English that you can follow it.
Okay. Yeah.
Right, because and it's not that there aren't the words in the other language, but it's the context in English carries a certain sense, and so they slip into English, and they'll slip a few words here and there in the middle of the sentence, and sometimes they will and sometimes they won't. So they're creating a mix, and that happens when you've got nexus of languages, and it's the Spanish in southern Florida is different from the Spanish in Tucson.
Sure.
Which is different from the Spanish in California.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. I learned my Spanish in California. Now, that doesn't mean I can't understand what I hear, but if I open my mouth, I hear giggles. So I don't do so much Spanish.
I was going to say, you could walk across the hall,
It needs to be practiced, and it needs to get localized. Even though one of my Spanish instructors in California was Cuban, but they used to mention that in Cuba we would say blah blah blah, but here I'm going to teach you this,
right?
And because they had shifted to California Spanish.
Well, for a while we had a Puerto Rican host over on La Gigante, and there are words that you could speak in Puerto Rican that don't mean the same thing.
No.
In Mexican Spanish. So, we've been through that. We've been through that a lot. So, that's very interesting. And you are right. The very differences of Spanglish, and of course, Miami is very much Cuban Spanish.
Yeah. With a good toss in of some Portuguese from our Brazilians.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Because they, there's not a blending, but there's a certain contact.
And they are moving here by the thousands from Brazil.
Yeah. We're going to be a very different country, very much faster than most people realize. I think the current projection is in the next 10 years, we're going to be what's called a minority-majority population.
Correct.
Where the majority of people are not any one flavor of anything, but rather we're and I don't even want to say that we're a blend, because it's not a melting pot. We don't all become some amalgamous mud mixture, but we're in fact a beautiful mosaic.
Ooh, I like that.
Right. So we're this beautiful, intricate pattern of different cultures and different traditions, and it's a beautiful picture. It's a mosaic, not a melting pot. And I think that when we do that, then we can honor what each person brings into the tapestry and into the mosaic.
Somehow, some way, we can't forget the Native Americans.
No. But we have for the most part.
Oh, yeah, there's no doubt about it.
Yeah. I did a major paper for my PhD, my psychology PhD, on American Indian psychology. There's actually a subsection of APA that deals with American Indian psychology and their problems. And their problems are just incredible. There's not enough trained psychologists in their population that are familiar with their tradition and their faiths that have gone through psychological training, because it's not easy for people to come off the res and go to grad school.
But really?
Yeah. It's starting to change, but there's not enough yet. And the other side to that is if you go to grad school and you get a psychology degree, who wants to go back and live in poverty? The good jobs are elsewhere. So you've got to be dedicated to your people. Yeah. Right? You've got to be dedicated to the nation to come back. And some are. And some aren't. Some are doing it to escape. Right? And so you've got this interesting... It's a very, very sad thing. That's not one of America's shining pieces, the way we've treated the folks that were here. Yeah, that's another interesting unit that I do with my Chinese. There's a Chinese explorer by the name of Zhang Ho, and he's often compared to Christopher Columbus. And it's like, and the text says, Christopher Columbus, blah blah blah, and it's not as rose-colored and crazy as some of the stuff that I've heard about Columbus. They do acknowledge that he really didn't make it to the U.S. He landed somewhere south of the U.S., but it also doesn't tell us how he totally abused the native populations wherever he was.
Well, and the Spanish did, though.
And after him, the Spanish, both.
Oh, yeah.
Right. I mean, he started it, and it certainly continued thereafter. And then there's the wonderful slave trade and all of those other things that happened in not all that long ago history.
No,
Right.
actually not.
We were. I caught a little bit of Stewart's Ask a Lawyer show, and he was talking about when is it equality and all these things, and when is it not, And I like to ask my students, how long have women had the vote? And it's not even yet 100 years, but how long have the blacks had the vote? Much less, right? 1965. Now that's not true. In some states it was earlier, but it was up to the state to decide. It became a federal law in 1965. Yeah.
Yeah, I was shocked when Kamala Harris last night was talking about busing.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, she was a Oaklander from the east side of the bay. But yeah, I was really shocked that they didn't have busing. I mean, my goodness, we had Los Angeles for years, and that they didn't have it in that town in Berkeley until she was going to school.
Yeah.
That blew me away.
Yeah. There's some interesting disparities. And there still are little alcoves and bastions of whatever going all over.
Well, hearing her talk, it's in a way no wonder you had like some of the, if you want to call it the violent groups that erupted in Oakland at the same time.
Yeah.
So they were trying to push change.
Yeah. Well, and there was an article, and I didn't click on it and read because I haven't had time to sit and read those wonderful articles. I want to read it. But there was something about 6 major activists in within usually any social change group. And it's, I always think of that Canadian mayor who said, never think that a small group can't change the world. It's the only thing that ever has. I think that was I may have the quote wrong, but the quote's out there.
Yeah, yep.
And it's true. It's a small group that's dedicated and becomes viable and is able to move something to.
Well, just
to
look
want
what
to
the
happen.
kids at Stoneman Douglas have done.
Yeah.
In a very short period of time.
And it's groups like that get motivated for one reason or another. And I know that our little congregation got motivated to exist. Had that not happened, I probably wouldn't still be in Tucson. But the way events unfolded, it gave the energy and the emotion to wanting our little congregation to happen. And so I'm really glad that it has, because I think we really do enhance the tapestry and the mosaic of the Treasure Coast. Because now there's another choice.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
I fully envision within the next 5 to 10 years there's going to probably be 7 or 8 congregations in the area, not just the 3 or 4 that are here now.
Well, when you look at Port St. Lucie,
It's grown, yeah.
projecting a growth of up to 520 in just 15 years. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, more than double.
Yeah, we're going to see a lot more. Plus, a big part of that bubble, you were talking about people moving up from South Florida, and on top of that bubble is there's a good chunk of Jewish population moving up. Where it used to be, it was mostly Northerners coming south, moving to Port St. Lucie.
Right.
Now I'm getting a lot of phone calls from people saying, we're going to move up from Boca, we're going to move up from West Palm. What's the Jewish community like in Port St. Lucie? So now we're getting an influx here in Port St. Lucie that's coming from both directions.
You bet.
And, so my word to the wise is buy land now.
Well, move-ins according
before we go to Bia Boca.
Yeah, according to the Florida scorecard, the move-ins are now number 1 is Miami, number 2 is Palm Beach, now number 3 is New York City, and then the Mid-Atlantic number 4. Yeah. It's changed dramatically.
Yeah. Well, Miami can't grow south. They can't grow east. They can't grow a whole lot west. So the only
they already have Kendall. That's as far west as you can go.
Yeah. So where are they going to grow? They're going to grow north. So it's going to be this back wave, if you will, that's going to come back up, and that's not rocket science. I saw that 7-8 years ago when I first came to the Treasure Coast.
Yeah.
So the college is only going to get bigger and better, and it's already so good. I do. I love IRSC. I love so many things here in the Treasure Coast, and it's a good life. So.
Yeah, it's like we're in our embryonic stage.
Yes, we are. Yeah,
it's really cool.
Yeah, I do. And we started out by saying, I want some of the things that Tucson has, and Tucson, of course, has been around since dirt, and before air conditioning. Port St. Lucie was not around before air conditioning. It's amazing how short the history is in Port St. Lucie. But Port St. Lucie is going to be an amazing place, and the Treasure Coast along with it.
I agree. So, yeah.
Good things will be happening.
We're just scratching the surface of growth.
We are. So this is as good a time as any to mention. We're coming into the summertime for the Jewish calendar. The next biggest event will be Tisha B'Av, the 9th of Av, and I'll talk more about that next week. But that's actually a very sad time on our calendar. And it starts with the 17th of Tammuz, and that's just starting now. And it commemorates the breaching of the wall by the Romans and the destruction of the temple. So we're into that really, the nadir, the low part of the calendar. And then we'll start to climb up toward the high holidays. So I'll start to talk about some of those things. Mm-hmm. So if you have any questions about any of those things, you can give me a call. Yet today we've got another 10 or 11 minutes left in the class.
Hello, China.
Hello, professors. Yeah. Between I was thinking about IRSC. But,
what you need to do is get some of your Chinese students to call in on the show.
Yeah, except that right now they're all asleep.
Oh, well, that's true.
Yeah, because they're 12 hours apart.
Slight time difference.
Until we go to daylight savings time, in which case it's going to be worse because then they're 13 hours. But, so they're all asleep now, or at least they should be. I'm sure some of them are under their covers on their iPads.
Yeah. So they are the same.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they have an abundance of iPads. They have watches, and they have all of the toys. Yeah, there was one little kid. He's a little tiny one, and he's like, yeah. He's chattering away on his watch. So I guess he was talking to mom or something. There was another time once when I asked a kid a question, he didn't know the answer, and he tapped the watch and he asked the question to the watch, and I'm like, that's not the way it's supposed to work.
And Siri answered? Oh.
Actually, I think it was Mom that answered.
Oh, my.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That truly is amazing.
So, but, So, we have, I don't think that today's youth anywhere in the world can imagine life without tablets and phones and all of the fun things. The Chinese don't usually use Facebook, but they use something called WeChat, which is a Chinese character Facebook kind of thing where you can post videos and stuff like that. And a lot of my students are on that. And then I'm sure they're on Instagram and all the other places that it's an interesting electronic world. And then we have, of course, older Americans who still use their flip phone and don't text. And you're like, I really wish you texted.
Oh, we know a few of those.
Yeah. So, but it'll be, I'm trying to imagine what it's going to be like in, say, another 10 or 15 years, and when I'm going to be getting toward the fossil stage. And what technology am I going to refuse to want to accommodate?
5G technology will change everything. Now, the question is going to be the health related issues of 5G.
Yeah.
We'll have to see.
Yeah. We will modify. Well, you have to tell you that when I leave my house and I turn on the radio, I hear it fine until I get to the corner, and then there's apparently a couple of
cameras.
No, not well, I don't know what it is, but the static coming over those are cameras?
Yep.
Security cameras?
You betcha.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
I can't even hear the station till I get back out of the hood and out onto the street.
Oh, well, if that's, you're talking here?
No, not here.
Oh, because if it's here, it's this Spanish station that blows out everything else. Yeah.
No, there it is. I thought it was the transformers leaking.
Could be.
Because they're
if the power companies do not clean those cans, then it's tough on AM.
Yeah. Which makes you wonder what it's like to be underneath those transformers.
Which is, that's a whole different story. Yeah.
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 Because if your AM dial can pick it up, it's out there.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, there's no doubt about it. That's the beauty of Alexa in the new cars, because everything is digital stereo. And it's not affected by anything that happens. Now, with the 5G, they're talking about the experiment they had in Fort Lauderdale with internet through power lines. That's something else.
Ooh.
The FM stations are griping about that because that's their frequency. And so it creates chaos with the FM band. So, yeah, they got to work some stuff out.
Yeah, and they don't have a whole lot of band to play with.
No, not at all.
AM's got a lot more room on the dial.
Yes.
So, and again, that's not rocket science. Look at your car radio setup. You've got 2 buttons for AM stations and 1 for FM, which should tell you something.
Mm-hmm.
And those little subtle points. But having done both FM and AM, it is different. So it'll be interesting to see where we go in the world. I have this picture of Moses coming down off the mountain, right? He's holding 2 Apple iPads, right?
Actually, I've seen that.
Right.
I've seen that.
And I keep wondering where the third one. Never mind. Good old Mel Brooks. Yeah. One of the better. That's absolutely. There are a couple of really classic scenes in that movie that are just, and that's one of them. It's an interesting time it is an interesting time that we live in, but not in a negative way. Yet, I hope.
The Iranian thing scares the daylights out of me.
There's a whole lot of things in the world that scare the living daylights out of me. We're not going to get started on that, or we won't be done in 6 minutes. It'll be a lot longer. So anyway, I'm going to invite people, go ahead and send me an email if you'd like to tell me a topic that you'd like to have us talk about, or give us a call. The phone number is 772-340-1590. You can also give a call and let us know what you'd like in a future episode. And you can email me as Rabbi, RABBI, at EITZCHAYIM.org, Rabbi at eitzchaim.org. And as you can probably guess, that is our website, EITZCHAYIM.org. And we do Friday night services every week. We're a full-service congregation, so Friday night services every Friday at 7:30. And Saturday morning, we have Stolen Moments at 9:30 and services at 10:30. Stolen Moments is scripture studies or studies or topics of interest. And the only time we change that is for a major holiday or for a bar or bat mitzvah celebration. And then we start the service, excuse me, a little bit earlier. But you're welcome to join us for any of those. We have meditation classes Monday at 1 o'clock every week. And we've got services of wholeness and comfort and a variety of other things. So please check us out. And we're on Facebook and we're on the World Wide Web. Again, that website is www.eitzcharyim.org. And if you look for Congregation Eitz Charyim on Facebook, you'll find us there as well. We stream our services, and you're welcome to participate in any of a number of different ways. So it's a good time to be doing that. We're going to be starting to gear up toward the High Holy Day season. We'll talk more about those holidays as we get into the summer as well. But as I said, next week I think I'm going to talk a little bit about Tisha B'Av and some of the low points of the year. The Av is the summer month, the one month that still has a Hebrew name. Most of the months have actually lost their Hebrew name, and they have what's called Syriac. It's not Syrian, but it's Syriac. It's from the Babylonian exile. We picked up, Aramaic and Mesopotamian names for the months.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's always been a blending. That's not new. Spanglish is just the most recent version.
Holy smokes.
Yeah. And sometimes in Jewish circles we talk about Yenglish, right? Which is a blending of Hebrew and English. It's not Yiddish and English. It's a blending of Hebrew and English. And Yiddish is Hebrew and German. It's really what it was. It's in it. And the reason that those things there's two reasons that you have those kind of mixes of language. One is that there may not be a way of saying something in another language that you can say in a different language.
Mm-hmm.
And the other one is just where the person is who's got both languages in their rolling around in their head. And I always like to ask multilingual people what language they dream in. And most of them actually,
Ooh.
yeah.
Yeah, that's cool.
People will dream in multiple languages. And because, there's often dialogue in your dreams or signs or something else that you're reading or looking at. And so you do know that, if you pay attention, you know what language you speak. So here's something for people to think about. If you want to check your dreams, put a notebook on your nightstand and jot down what you remember whenever you wake up. And you'll start to remember more of your dreams. Dreams are fascinating. They really are. They're just totally not an easy, rational thing. But they're absolutely real to the people who are going through them.
Mm-hmm.
And,
oh, sure.
Then you get into the questions, right? Are rainbows real? That and other questions coming up on future episodes of Ask a Rabbi. So please do put this number down and give me a call next week, 772-340-1590. This has been Rabbi Shafir Lobb, and this has been Ask a Rabbi.
You've been listening to Ask a Rabbi right here on WPSL 1590 Port St. Lucie, the talk of the Treasure Coast, webcaster to the world on Alexa and Google Home.